Hello and welcome to a truly epic Trihard project. Today you're going to see the great oak come together. We're going to incorporate all the know-how of our previous videos and see just how far we can take it. The idea is that we're not going to give you step-by-step instructions on building a piece of scenery. We want you to bring the knowledge to naturally iterate on scenery. Put simply, we're more about world building. We want to give you the knowledge to create a fully rendered landscape rife with your own lore and ready for armies to clash on. To that end, Q has challenged himself to build the Great Oak. This is the type of centerpiece that is going to set the tone for a whole campaign, so it's important to have a cool story that can underpin the build. This Great Oak build comes straight out of Trihard's internal lore. That's right, we've got a whole setting we're working on in the studio. It's loosely based on Irish mythology, but in a way we get to have a lot of fun with it. The third build will always be about how we can challenge ourselves with the knowledge and create something truly epic with it. Just as an example, we had a 3-part rock video. The building block were the rocks themselves. Then in video 2 we decorated the rocks and made standing stone formations. Finally, in video 3 we brought that knowledge together to create the barrow, which looked amazing, but was just a simple iteration of the rocks, albeit with a lot of extra work put in by Q. Building a world in your own head is a super important dimension to scenery construction, because to bring it to life you need to know who planted this oak tree, why did they build a stone circle, and what rituals were performed here. Even if you don't know all of that, the mystery of how all these things happen brings a depth that you wouldn't have if you hadn't built a whole world around this one piece of scenery.
Yeah, the ring for around the tree and then a platform. The platform idea was more just because it was material that came out of it. And then this was the idea for like an altar type or a place to worship it without actually being able to touch it. Board's far better. It's a great base of material. You can do any shape you want, it's picking the right shapes, I suppose, isn't it? The ring is from the previous project, I suppose, isn't it? But it's more kind of like as if it was supposed to be a significant tree at one stage and it's been abandoned and overgrown, so the spilling out of it, how do you convey age? Choose. It's a good solid ring. It doesn't have the lines in it, the bog roll line, so they're good fat and they're sturdy enough. And this here's essentially to give it a wider base, but also the effect as if the roots are coming off from it, tree trunks. straight trees just feel a wee bit manufactured, don't they? So a bit of a natural bend in it, as it were. We're good for it. Trees aren't perfect where they are, but not the way we think it, I suppose. And then natural flowing shapes, that's why like this type of thing's good, and then you can kind of get an idea of where you want them to branch out or how you want them to spread out. And then obviously I cut them all off. These cones, you can kind of get the directions you want. But it is all kind of Minecraft at the start, and then you put that polyfiller or decorator's caulk over it. It blends it all in. It's just layers. Again, you know. Same as the rock, kind of. If you just build the shape out of card, and instead of using the toilet roll for the texture, you use the decorator's caulk. It's the same process as just start off with the thicker branches and then gradually get smaller. But like once you get to a certain stage, you want to fill gaps more. You know, the stick stage. After this part, it's all about filling gaps. You've got all them directions. Starting with chopsticks and then moving to thinner barbecue skewers. And gradually getting thinner. If you wanted to go really hardcore, I suppose you could go toothpicks at the end, you know, or even seafoam. Seafoam's great, but it's expensive. You know what I found as well? See if this is a bit wetter. If you spray up with water, like a wee mist of water, it goes on easier. Yeah, and then but if you do it too much, it goes runny and snappery, which isn't great. Because you want them edges. You know, the rake tool kind of just bangs a load more in it. But I think if you wanted to go more gnarly, you would do it in layers. You know, do patches, let it dry, do another layer patch, you know, so you can get that layers of way old bark sits on top of bark. And then, if you think about it, the rake lines are only the blend where the connection is to make it feel more natural. Sketched out a few lines for the roots to kind of get a feel for where, you know, like where they end up or from thickness difference. This here's it's a must. Same with the polyfiller after they blend it all in. Once again, it hides all seams. And you're better using cardstock for the edging, and it's better to put the shiny side in, not out.
We used decorator's caulk in our last tree build. This time around, we're using polyfiller, or if you're an American, you'll know this as spackling paste. Q is using it here to blend the edge of the cardboard platforms together. This is an important part of any build. You should always have a stage of construction when you consider how the whole scenery piece blends together, especially if you're going for naturalistic scenes like this. Glue guns, caulk and polyfiller are the way to go for this sort of blending. Going back to our notion of building blocks, with any luck you'll have lots of random pieces around after our videos, so put them together in your own ways, find natural ways to blend the various elements together.
It's after you've made a rock, but it's better to do it before you've made it, you know, and then you do that the stone texture after, the toilet roll texture afterwards, because it blends all the seams, fills it all out. If you don't have time constraints, you can go super ham on these, you know.
The root system on the great oak is truly ancient. Q was careful to spend time on this root system because he believed it would make it look incredibly old and integrate the grand structure of the great oak into surrounding scenery. Q is using tinfoil, which is a great construction tool. It can be shaped, gives a great surface to slather polyfiller on, and is cheap as hell, so you can go to town on creating natural root systems.
I wanted to do loads of this all over them, you know, like growing out of it, but you'd be out for years. Yeah, but if you don't have time constraints and you want to go, obviously, if money's not an issue, you can make it a lot quicker. That ring you would make out of foam, you know, all them big bits made out of foam. Random rock pits, just scrap foam. Realistically, you don't have to make a pattern at all. You can just hint at it. It's more than enough. Because, I mean, you could try and do like really detailed stuff and keep doing it. It's going to be a lot of work. But if you just hint at it, it's their imagination that determines what the pattern is, not yours. You know, they can kind of go, oh, the overall pattern is just like hinted at. Plus, it saves you so much time. Once it dried and you put another layer over it, looked as if it was overlapping. just naturally as it was. But it is all about stages. If you plan it out before, you know. And obviously just directional scrapes to help the illusion. But then once you've got all your structure down, you throw the stone on top of it, you're like half bang. Then blend the roots and the tree together. This is why I think that letting it dry and doing it over again is good, because if on the trunk you notice it overlaps, you know,
yeah,
the bark overlaps.
Going back to notions of the depth of complexity, after the large roots are in place, Q puts down some string, showing the roots snaking off in all sorts of directions.
And then some of the smaller roots that are glued to the floor of it, you blend in, you know, so you can't see the glue lines. Then it's the same process as the tree, you know, because you want the texture to continue, and then it makes it all one piece.
Get yourself cheap paints. I can't overstate this enough. Get cheap acrylics. They'll be thicker than miniature paints, so can serve as a base colour. They layer well and can be watered down for a wash. Get yourself one of those big multi-sets. They are perfect for Wargames terrain.
Literally the last of the paint. That's why the bottom's cut off it. And then what I have left over here, I mixed with another colour to it. In that blue grey. It's funny because when you base these, it's like when you were 10 you'd have went, that's fast, that's done. But it's just one layer. It looks rough when your first layer goes on of colours like your first base layers. The worst thing is there's no way to rush blitz that, because it has to get in, you have to cover as much that way as possible. And see all that boggle that's stuffed on here, it's all waste stuff. I've used the map up stuff for the dry brushes on. That's why it's always scraggled, like it looks rough. Dry brush, probably the most satisfying part. Because you don't really see the texture of the work you've put in until you dry brush it. At one stage, the most sought after material, the foam, was worth less than the stuff I was basing these. Same again. Dry brush, all that texture you spent all that time doing, you know, comes through. It's really bright here too with that yellow, but see, yellow ochre, it's whatever way it works with brown, it just kind of goes into this nice colour. Look at how bright it is there. But the wash brings it right down, and you can just give it a subtle dry brush at the end and you'll pick up the highlights.
If you see any tinfoil or any weight or anything, obviously avoid that.
A key element to all scenery construction is depth of complexity. This footage of Q PVAing progressive layers of rock is a great example. He puts large stones down, a medium gravel, then a smattering of dust. The layers raise progressively until we have ramps leading up to the ritual stone, and a depth of complexity that will tell the human eye that it looks really real.
Yeah, well, also you're trying to get them to catch in places you'd think that they would naturally catch. Realistically, if you've got the time, get rid of them straggly bits. Nightmare. It's a bit of sway out of the heat gun. But if you've other stuff on it that's sensitive to the heat gun, you can't just blast it with a heat gun. I've melted 2 of my brushes with a heat gun now. Well, once you give them the watery PVA glue, see, it holds them in place so that you can build up on them to pour the PVA glue all over. A lot of stone, I don't paint stone anymore. You just use washes. So you're saving a time again now. Then the finer gravels fill in the gaps. And then the blend, see where the roots meet the ground. It's hard to get that decorator stuff on it, so kind of just hiding stuff. I mean, obviously you can overbury it too. Very cool, it's a lot of stones. But then once you bury most of it in flock, you lose loads of it. Stinking wash. Scary part. See the way I start with the stones first, because if it's terrible, you can go, oh, I don't think I'll like this one. But honestly, without washes, I know it just feels like it's some Fisher Price toy. No grime on brand new toys. And then it dries out and you kind of feel a wee bit better about yourself. And then just literally to pick up the best edges, you know, where it's went too dark. Bit of white on the stone anyway. Same again, yellow ochre. But the tiniest bit, you know, like just the top highlights. Trees got a better colour to it. That's and then flock the last of the worst bits. This is a satisfying stage. You know, like once you get to this, it just starts to look like something proper. It's all starting. It's where you start to panic, like, oh, if I mess up now, it's ruined.
Experimentation is an important part of the hobby, especially when you've collected a storeroom of tools and materials. To bring the final layer of complexity, Hugh is making his own clinging moss. He makes a paste with a dark flock and mixes it with PVA glue. In continued experimentation, Hugh found that the moss was too dark, so waited for it to dry and gave it a dry brush with some yellow acrylic.
And then obviously once you give it that yellow highlight, I think it's like brilliant yellow or something it's called. Really brought it back in, and then makes its texture, you know, stand out. It's really all that. If you put something on that has texture, it needs a dry brush on it, or a wash or a dry brush. But these are to fill the worst gaps, so use the cheap green ones to fill the bad gaps. to fill the pod gaps, and then use the nice ones, break them up to use as like more points of interest or like different shades of green. Like there's about 5 shades of green in there. So there's like ramps to both platforms. Then you've got a round canopy here, kind of filling out all the empty space, trying to get a feel for it. Obviously all trees don't follow any real rules, I suppose. It is more probably suited for D&D, but there's no reason it couldn't be used in the rest of them. A lot of it all is if it's been abandoned, like see my new greens and all this, just that type of vibe.
Long ago, in a time before we recorded time, the lands of Earth hung from the branches of a great oak. It stretched across the cosmos, each branch supporting a different land, a different people. At the highest peaks lived the Trihard, a fair race of sorcerers and legendary warriors. Far below the twisting roots dwelled the Fomorians, a decrepit one-eyed race who coveted the sun-blessed lands above. Strung between these two great and terrible peoples were the Finnbar, a diminutive, featureless people with depthless wonder and eternal love for their lands on the Great Oak. The Trihard traversed the branches of the World Tree with flying ships and chariots. setting out on epic adventures to slay mighty beasts and settle grudges. One such adventure saw Conchobar MacConradha and a host of 30 men descend on the realms of the Firbolg. Their destiny was to slay a nefarious Fomorian warlock who had sent corrupting tendrils up from his dungeon kingdom. The warlock's corrupting magic had created bleeding and bloated wounds along the tree, and if it wasn't stopped now, then the realms of the Aedh would fall from the heavens to crash into the gnarled and mighty roots of the World Tree. No matter the skill, wit, or strength of Conchobar's band, the evil schemes and malice of the warlock was too great. With a fell storm of magic, the Aedh host were smashed from their longships, the flying steeds of their chariots driven insane, their eyes rolling back in their heads, foaming at the mouth, crashing to the ground. Conchobar alone rose from the wreckage, and driven into an almighty rage was taken by the war spasm of the Aedh. His muscles grew and strained against his bronze torques, his skin became hard like the antler of a stag, and his mind became a weapon unto itself. Conchobar MacConradha cut through a legion of Fomorian creatures, misshapen and lumbering, with crude bronze weapons that would tear and rend. He laid low the warlock's greatest champions, slew his most vile beasts, and battered down the gates to his fortress. He chased the warlock up a jagged hill, from the peak of which the warlock floated, the span of a ship above the ground. Conchobar jumped, his weapon keen and true, but the distance was too great. As he fell, he was beset by the worst Fomorian magical lore, drained until his husk turned to dust and his soul scattered to the wind. A mournful gust bellowed over the hill, one that sounded quite sweet to the warlock's ears. Aedh, shaman of the Firbolg, lurched from his seat, his legs sore from being folded for many hours in deep trance. People of his clan were silhouetted against the ritual smoke that filled the room, squatting in a perfect, motionless semicircle. The vision had been strong. It took him from the moment he sat down and lingered with him even now. The warlock's magic was powerful, and if the Aedh were defeated, what hope had Aedh in his Firbolg? He pressed his palms into the ground, taking a moment to feel the gritty earth, then pushed himself to standing. Although their people did not talk openly, they shared an inner language, from which songs and spells could be woven, and every featureless Firbolg face pointed in his direction and had but one question. What brings the doom of the tree? It was the warlock with his nefarious magic and depthless malice, a one-eyed demon king of realms beyond nightmare. Every Firbolg recoiled, knowing of the Fomor and their designs on the branch realms. It was the warlock, and even the grace of the Aedh was powerless to stop him. Aedh raised his hands to the smoke-filled room and called upon the spirits of the land. Green energy scintillated across his blue skin, sparking into the air to gather the ritual smoke. It began to dance in turgid black ropes, bending intricate angles to create abstracted figures, one glorious and fair, the other a hooded shadow, with only his fanged grin visible. The fair figure jumped from the pinnacle of a hill to fall into darkness and dissipate. The hooded shadow grew until there was nothing but his triumphant grin filling the room. When? The thought rang out in urgency from the gathered Firbolg. It would be a long time yet, but sure as Mother Moon drowns the sun each day, these events will come to pass. When? The thought rang out insistently. Aedh thought for a long moment. The vision flashed in his mind, the sails of the Aedh Danann, their destruction at the hands of Fomorian magic, and finally, their champion being slain by the warlock. What could the Firbolg do in the face of such awesome power? They stood half as tall as a Fomorian, and to the knee of a Aedh. Who were they to challenge the gods and demons of the Great Oak? Then a thought flowered in Aedh's head, one that escaped his mind and flooded the room with calming surety. Aedh reached into a pouch and retrieved an acorn. It filled his whole hand. He raised it to the gathered Firbolg. We shall plant this acorn on the peak of a hill, and name that hill Knockdarach, the Hill of the Oak. And when this oak has grown into full life, and when the warlock makes his move and the gods descend to stop him, then his Fomorian back will be against the bark of this oak, and will have nowhere but the point of a blade to run. Thanks for watching today. If you enjoyed our content, we'd really appreciate it if you could give us a like and a subscribe. We're a growing channel, and even one sub means an awful lot to us. Until next time, try hard.
Are we in?
Yes.